artists and animators, and welcome to another Toon Boom interview. Colin Benett is an animator, artist, and instructor based in Melbourne, Australia. You might know Colin best for his YouTube channel called Onion Skin, where he posts animation tutorials and breakdowns, as well as other experiments in rigging and compositing. We invited Colin onto today's stream to talk about his work and share some of his experiments in Toon Boom Harmony. Hello, Colin.
Hello. I'll stop this now. Good morning. How are you? It's great to be here.
We're great. Thank you so much for making time to come on to today's show.
Of course.
So, Colin, I saw your video with Tracy Strong that you posted recently. What was that experience like?
Oh, wonderful. It's always great talking to different Harmony users of different calibers, those who are brand new and those who have been using it for, a decade or more. Everyone uses the program differently. I think Harmony is a good name for this program because there is something to learn from each different person. And what's great talking to Tracy is, of course, with the effects animation, she showed me this method of being able to sort of loop things infinitely. So you sort of ignore where a set of frames starts and ends, and just keep doing it over and over and over again, which is apparently a holdover from animating on paper. And of course, that's where Harmony found its roots, wasn't it? With being able to scan in pages and having the X sheet and the fill chart and things like that. So learning sort of the history of where animating came from and the sort of traditional days as a person who grew up in the digital age, I found that to be a lot more engaging. So I can sort of learn the classical methods and the modern methods in a way that it all sort of meshes together, which is really cool. Because there's very large portions of the user base now, I think, who are coming in solely for the cutout stuff, or they probably think that Harmony is only a rigging and cutout tool. And a reminder of just how powerful it is as a method of just straight ahead drawing in a way that just automatically came together was very refreshing. And I'm looking forward to experimenting a lot more with that. That was really fun.
All right. So I know a lot of animators and artists who work with Toon Boom Harmony or might be familiar with your channel, but for those who aren't, how would you describe your channel?
That's a really good question because I'm redeciding it frequently. It's always been the reason why it's named what it is so that the only thing I'm really limited by is anything to do with animation, for not just aspiring animators and animators themselves, but just for animation enthusiasts. However, I always come back to something Toon Boom Harmony based. That seems to be my core focus, is things to do with that program. So it may be very structured, step-by-step, do this tutorials to sort of learn the inner mechanics of it, because it can get quite complicated, through to just experimenting with stuff, because there's also a lot of, it's almost like there's a meta of how people like to use the program that, become fairly standard, especially when you have a large team of animators. Everyone needs to work the same way. So there's methods that sort of become more standard. I think it's fun to break those standards and sort of take maybe an underappreciated feature, plug it into this other one and see what happens. There's so many bizarre and interesting ways to make things move. So I think there's a decent amount of joy in seeing just where those experiments can lead. But the most important thing, of course, is just helping people in their own journey with this program and this industry and things like that. So the more I sort of get bombarded by a particular request or question, then that's usually the direction that I'll take videos in. Personally, in industry, a lot of my role has ended up being something relatively technical in how the program works, or solving problems and putting out the fire of the day and that kind of thing. So I end up being a lot more software orientated rather than just like raw how to animate kind of thing. Maybe I should do more of that. We'll see.
And so you talked a little bit about your channel. What was the reason why you started this channel? You've had it for about 6 years now.
It has been a long time now. That's a really long time. I started it in 2015. Um, and the reason for it was after, so, hmm, I suppose I should probably also mention why I felt like I should be the one to do it as well. I think we come to that later, I'm not sure. But I was on when I first started using Toon Boom products, I was on a production that was using Toon Boom Studio. And that was a program that's, it's very good at what it does, but it seems like it was more targeted towards the hobbyist end of the line. It was quite full on to try and do a full scale production with it, and, moving files between one another and things like that. So eventually, when we finally moved on to having Harmony, it was such a breath of fresh air with all of these wonderful feature sets that I sort of just dove in trying to understand as much of it as I possibly could, as quickly as I could, in order to just so we wouldn't have to deal with the same workarounds that we did when using Studio. We didn't have to have a workaround anymore. There was just straight up a feature for it, which was nice. And I found that there just wasn't really a ton of resources online outside of documentation and just a few tutorials. So as I experimented and was helping to train the team I was a part of and develop techniques that were good for that particular production, I just really sort of fell in love with how far this program could be pushed. Meanwhile, the online community was still very, very much Flash orientated. The sort of young, aspiring animators would talk to the people that they looked up to, which were almost entirely holdovers from the like the mid 2000s Newgrounds days, where we all used Flash. I was one of those people, and I felt for everyone because at this point Flash hadn't really changed in like 7 years. It was feeling really, really dated, and it bummed me out. I was like, guys, look at this. This is really nice. This is the industry standard. If you use this for your personal projects, then you're also just automatically qualified for everything else now. So that was my first sort of quest, was to try and normalize Harmony to an audience that hadn't really engaged with it before. And then I found it to be just as applicable to students as well, who were mostly learning very traditional methods. A lot were still just learning on paper. A lot was not really learning industry standard techniques. So there was one time where we brought on a whole team of people straight out of uni, probably about a dozen or so, who all had to learn entirely new methods from scratch that weren't getting taught in schools. So I thought just another resource to add to the mix would have been really useful to give people a bit of a step up out of the gate. And, you guys yourselves have really filled in a lot of those gaps now as well. There's a wonderful community Discord, and there's more and more people doing their own Harmony tutorials and showing off their rigs and different methods and stuff like that. So it's been wonderful seeing how much this community has evolved and grown over the last 5 years. I'm not really sure what my place in it should be from here, really. There was a lot of things I really had to do quickly at first, but now everyone else is taking care of it. So we'll see where I end up going in the next couple of years.
Yeah. So you mentioned like Newgrounds and the like pre-YouTube animation environment where people were loading stuff onto their browser through plugins. What are your favorite videos from like that period of time?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been very privileged that a lot of my favorite stuff from back then have been people that I've, since met and bonded with very closely. So people like Felix Colgrave, James Lee, and Jazza were all very cool artists from back then, who would, particularly those three, would always use symbols in really interesting ways. Um, they would find really clever methods of finding that balance between quality and efficiency so that it would be possible to make a 5 to 10 minute short by yourself in a somewhat reasonable amount of time and be able to upload it to the internet for free in a pre-social media time. And I found things like that to be far more inspiring than like Disney movies and things, because we were all just 14-year-old kids in our bedrooms mucking around. Watching a Disney film was just sorcery. I have no idea how that's going to happen, how they do that. It is, but Flash animation sort of broke the spell a little bit because you could see how symbols would slide around. The brush was really wonky, so you could see when people did redraws, and you could even import SWFs and just sort of break down a scene live. So yeah, as a kid, you could look at it and say, I can do that. I couldn't, but you felt inspired enough to at least give it a go. So that's sort of where all that started. And yeah, so I've been very lucky since then to get to know a lot of them. And we continue to sort of exchange notes and ideas. And a lot of that community has stuck to their guns, software-wise. And we have wonderful arguments about the pros and cons of each. And the story is relatively similar. So one of the ongoing crusades of a channel like Onion Skin is how to sort of ease the pain of migrating from one program to another. It doesn't matter where you're coming from or where you're going to. I found it's just a matter of asking anybody to let go of their collected knowledge in favor of something else, even if it's going to make their lives better in the long run. It's just really difficult to do. Because, I train a lot of studios and individuals now, and people who are fresh out of the gate, who have never animated before, pick it up real quick, like in a day or less. And consistently, the students who struggle the most, and it feels really weird when this happens, is classically trained Disney animators. They're so wonderfully talented. They're able to get such beautiful expression out of a character in a way that no one else can. But getting a rig to move is a real struggle. It goes against so many different muscle memories, and it's a really surreal experience because I just want to be asking them questions and learning from them. And yet here we are. So yeah, I wish I could talk to some of them again and sort of see where they're at now, and if it was something that they were able to, crack, or if it was a little bit too much asking someone to literally let go of 30 years of experience and start again in a different direction. However, we were talking about Tracer before, talking to other animators, talking to Ollie Putlin recently, who is another very experienced rigger and animator in the Harmony community. And his background was in stop motion. And he found the transition to cutout animation really, really easy. And that was a bit of one of those, oh, that's so obvious, but I'd never thought about it before.
Yeah, because he's already working with a puppet, right?
Right. So it's, I think it's a much smaller learning curve going from stop motion to this than from drawing, because like we could go on about this all day. There's a lot of different methods to be able to do different things, and a lot of people just sort of just tell me the way to do it. And I'm almost on the fence right now when it comes to animating with rigs and things. If it is ideal to be roughing it out by hand and then essentially using rigs as some fancy cleanup where you pose it all up, or you focus on key poses first and you block it all out, or if you just say screw it to all of that and just animate straight ahead with the puppet itself. It depends how they're built. It depends on the pipeline. It depends on the animators doing it. There's a lot of moving parts, but I think that discovery of pipeline is one of the things that I enjoy the most. Figuring out the puzzle on what is the most efficient way a production can come together. And a cool thing about Harmony is that it molds to fit whatever your production desires may be, as opposed to, you might appreciate this little story, I'm not sure, but I was talking to one animator once who was convinced they told me that they didn't like Harmony, and they were told, and they the reason why is that they thought the name Harmony meant that the Toon Boom's plan as a company was to take all of the animators everywhere and get them animating using the exact same method and style. And I was like, no, it's completely the opposite. It's about being able to take, the Swiss Army knife of a program that can do whatever you need it to do. And that's one of the real challenges with tutorial making as well. People want to know, how do I use this program, when it really needs to be figuring out how to teach it to yourself to fit your own personal methods and style. So that's why I did this like big 20-minute video that took me like 6 months or something to make, that doesn't tell you how to animate it at all. It just sort of breakdowns the background structure and fundamentals of what makes the program tick. Because I believe that once that stuff clicks mentally, then you can move around the software with a lot more confidence and be able to just sort of press buttons and see what they do, and figure out how it adapts to your style a lot easier. It's a bit of a mouthful to get to get through that video, but I highly encourage it, because I think things just start to make a lot more sense when you have. Sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded one, but I guess that's
great. And if anyone's curious about why we call it Toon Boom Harmony, before we had Harmony, we had a lot of very different software offerings. We had Pencil Check Pro, we had Toon Boom Studio, Toon Boom Animate. Instead of selling like 5 or 6 different tools in the animation production pipeline, we realized, hey, we could sell one tool and it'd be a lot easier for animation than having to switch between 5 or 6.
Yeah, but it was a shame to lose Garfield's Comic Boom. It's a real game changer.
I love Garfield's Comic Boom.
We should integrate it back into the stamp tool.
I'd love that. I think we need to clear the rights for that again. So, Colin, you are not just a YouTuber, you're also a working animator. Have your coworkers watched your tutorials?
Yeah. It's one of the things that keeps me going, because YouTube it's pretty tough. Like, it can be a real grind sometimes to sort of just keep it afloat, and because it is only at a hobby level as well. So it always has to be done in spare time, which is difficult to find time for when working full time. But it's relatively consistent now that if I go into a new studio, there's at least a small handful of people who recognize my voice from across the room, which is a weird experience, but it's it's weird to talk about, because like, I guess we all like that kind of attention, but when it actually happens, you don't really know how to respond to it. But it is one of the big things that I think keeps me going, because it is just concrete proof that, okay, yes, this channel is actually making a difference for people, and it is making it easier for them to figure out how to use this thing, and get their foot into the door of the industry as well. And that's happened quite a few times, seeing people from, like, just in the chat or the comments section who are students or just sort of feeling it out, and then hearing that they're either working in a studio or literally bumping into them in real life just out of nowhere. That's pretty wild. And I had one more point that I've forgotten about it. I can't remember, so whatever.
We'll get back to it. So, Colin, you've experimented with Toon Boom Harmony's node system in ways that not many artists have. You've built a rig that acts like a rag doll. You've bent flat layers into cylinders, and you've created like custom fire brushes and a mustache brush. So I need to ask, why?
They're the kind of things that I don't really get to do on production as often. It's helpful towards productions because it teaches me how to tinker effectively with a goal. So if I hit an unexpected problem on production, I can be relatively confident that if I have no idea what the solution is, I will be able to find one or straight up invent one. But there's other directions that I know are never really going to turn up, at least in my personal day-to-day. So Onion Skin is a great place for me to have those experiments and sort of see where certain routes lead. The second reason is because when I do those sorts of weird experiments in my own time and pump out a little, 5 to 10 second looping whatever, that doesn't really tell the full story of what happened behind it. It just looks like a little animation, whatever. But I love I think there's a lot of joy to be had in the story behind what it took to get to that point. So should we have a poke around any of them, or see?
That sounds great.
Okay. Let's see what we got. I pulled out a few onto my desktop of some weird contraptions, like the. I know. I'll tell a quick story of. Actually, all right. A simple one that actually does have use in production, because I didn't really experiment with this at the time until later. But something I've been getting really into lately is function sharing. Function sharing is really cool, because it's something like this. It's like just a little arrow on a lever, but if we look at the arrow with the field chart on, it's really, really, really big, because it moves up to 12 points there, but in reality, on the field, this is 100%. Sorry, like 100 points up on the y-axis. So I sort of drew this up, and it has it as it is, where you can move this arrow up and down. And the idea of it is, and like this is a pretty common technique. I'm not saying that I made this up or whatever, but I think I did do it in parallel. Like I didn't watch any guides to figure it out. But this is something that you can just, in regards to experiments, like your imagination starts to go wild into how many different things you can do this with. But I use this a lot when it comes to having references on the stage, whether it be assembling a rig or needing to turn storyboards on and off or whatever. Is I take this little arrow here, go to its Y value, copy that function, and then head over to the drawings advanced tab with its opacity at the bottom, because this is weirdly off in the corner. Going off and changing this number every now and then, I can't be bothered. Paste the function link, and now I've just got myself a handy dandy little slider that fades in and out in real time. I use that for everything. That one's wonderful. A more obscure one would probably be the actually all of these are fairly relevant examples that I did use in production, so we'll ignore those. I guess go watch the videos to see the really weird stuff. Yeah, sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask you, have these helped you solve problems on productions? And apparently, yes.
I wasn't expecting to say yes at first, because the ones that make it into videos are the things that don't get used in a production anywhere, but it's like, I think this is really cool and I want to show it off to people. So this is sort of the way to do it. But in regards to solving problems on a production, where is a fun my favorite is probably the bending cylinder. This was a mind blow. So this was on a production where right from the get-go, we knew that there was always going to be scenes where characters have to stand inside this holographic cylinder, and they're like pressing buttons and programs all the way around them. So, okay, do we just draw that on 2 layers, or do we actually figure out how we can have a character sitting inside there in 3-dimensional space? And this is when I was first starting to figure out the program, and we learned that there was a 3D camera in here. So at first I just literally took a bunch of circles and turned them sideways and just stacked them on top of one another, put the character inside, and that sort of got us by, but I'd still have to draw the actual interfaces and little things that they were doing every time because perspective would always be different. And I was like, no, I really need a way to like physically bend a layer, but I'm certain that it just can't be done. I can't remember what the actual thought was, but I remember having the thought on just a drive home one day, like it was like a literal eureka moment. And I went home and started throwing together just a really just rough, broken prototype just to prove that it was possible to take a layer and then bend it. And it worked. And then I was able to spend the next full day at work making a more polished version that looked a little bit like this. This is a different one that I made for a video, but it's got a similar sort of principle in it. I can't remember if this one has shared functions as well all the way around or not. Let's see if it spins. Is it this one? That one doesn't seem to be turning. No, it's not that one. Let's see. We are looking at display. Where is display? It's in here.
And I just want to remind you, this is 2D animation software. It's not really made for this, but I'm amazed to see that it works.
No, it is not made for this at all. But, you know, that's the fun thing about this, is that you can, when you start sort of breaking a software is where it starts getting really fun. And I think just a testament to the versatility of a program like this is that, hey, I needed it to do something that it's not made for. Can we make it do that anyway? Yes. So this is pretty much a cylinder built polygon by polygon. Yeah, are all of these shared? Can I move them one at a time? I think they're all they're all together. But they move on. Remember, it's been a couple of years since I built it. But I think it works on every act. There we go. That sort of breaks the spell a little bit more, and you can see what's really happening. So it takes a flat image, splits it up into 32 little rectangles, and then each one is displaced by just like a few degrees. But because all the pegs are daisy chained like this, that information is, you know, added onto itself every time. So you get this wonderful patterned effect. And you can see the texture in the background there. Because, you know, originally I needed interfaces and images and things sliding across the screen. So if I get the drawing view on, I could work on this thing in real time, which was sick. Let's get nice little brush in there. There we go. Look at that. Yeah. So that just sort of appears on it now. And I could even pop a peg in here and start sliding it left and right. And there you go. So now we've got the structure staying the same, but the texture sort of slides along it as well. By the way, I don't know if it's because I have a beefier computer now, or if the Toon Boom team has done a really good job in the back end of this program. But when the first time I built one of these in 2014, I was not able to just slide it back and forth and just work. It was pretty chuggy. So kudos for...
You hear the fan spin up.
Yeah. Well, it would take probably about an hour to render a scene. It would take like a good minute or two per frame. So kudos to the releases that just sort of work on performance and stuff like that. I don't know if that's underappreciated, but yes, well done to R&D for making something as insane as this actually perform.
Yeah, we're getting a few questions in the chat about like, wait, is this really made using Harmony, or is that an imported 3D object? And no, that is Colin rigging this in Harmony.
I'm showing off the most ridiculous one on purpose because it's fun. But yeah, like I say, I got a video that sort of goes into it a little bit more. But let's activate this one layer at a time, and then you can sort of see what's going on. It's the actual underlying structure is really simple. It's just a applied peg transformation and a cutter with bunch of panels. You know, it's like a little green slat, ding, ding. As they said, you know, they go all the way down, but each one's parented. So if I were to pick up this one, there you go. You can see that slat comes out. But then picking up, say, from here, there you go. So you can see each one, it moves all the children down. And then it's all just stacked up and done in a very clean way, so it has very smooth results. So yeah, that's why I think this is a fun example to show off, because it looks impressive, but when you get right down to it, the theory behind it is relatively simple, which is why it was such a fun discovery, that I went from this is impossible to, hey, actually this is even kind of straightforward. But I guess according to you guys, no one had really thought to use it in this way before, which is cool. Do we have time to poke around a couple of others?
Yeah. So I was going to ask you which of the experiments you're most proud of on a creative or technical level. This one is really impressive. It's one that we've shown our internal team, and they've sort of puzzled that for a few minutes, like, oh, wow, I guess that works.
Cool. That's a bucket list thing right there. Impress R&D, and now I can die happy. All right, here's a different one that involved a bunch of problem solving specific to the task. So this was for a music video that I did with TRY, who is pretty prominent in our little community as well, and was for a collab between Justin Roiland and T-Pain, of all people, right? So what we needed is this little T-Pain head here, right? Just singing away. But we had to make 3 minutes in like less than 3 weeks. It was a lot of work to do very, very quickly. And at first we had a very industry standard looking rig, you know, front facing 3/4 in the profile, and it all moved accordingly. You know, very, very cool. However, like if we were making a series or an episode with it, that probably would have been quite ideal, because you could do a lot with a head like that. But you know, by adding more control, it can also add more time to use. However, it's a music video. All it had to do was sit there in the middle of the screen and sing. So, solution. We didn't really know much about master controllers yet, and even then, it probably would have taken too long to like set up the individual poses that you sort of summon from and stuff like that. So we did this. So there's like a weird 2.5D solution with a single control right in the middle. Sorry, I feel a weird trend of just showing off the 3D stuff, but this is probably the only time I've ever done it. Hello, cat.
That was Posey.
Fantastic. Yeah, so this gives me about 19, 20 degrees of movement in any direction. So I could just focus on the lip syncing by itself and then just sort of move this head around. The second problem was the hair. Didn't have time to animate follow through for a whole bunch of big dreadlocks. These needed to somehow animate on their own. Harmony doesn't have a physics engine built in, but it does have the dynamic spring. So maybe we could daisy chain a few of these off one another like that, so that they sort of amplify their bounce, and it worked. All I had to do was rotate the head, and the hair sort of bounced behind it, like that, which is kind of cool. And the last piece was the, I think you mentioned in your notes as well, the mustache brush, because I had to do all this lip syncing, and drawing 1, 2, 3 lines that sort of fit around each other, I couldn't be bothered doing that and having it look good. So that was done with there we go, mustache brush. A whole bunch of matte resizes and matte blurs. This is probably the thing that I use the most, mainly just because I make a lot of YouTube thumbnails where the text needs to be emboldened. But that's all that is display 4. There you go.
I
Hard
really like the
idea.
spirit of I can't be bothered to draw 3 lines every time I'm doing this. So I'm going to open up the node view.
I can see where you're going with this. Yeah, am I doing it in a way that is more labor intensive than it actually needs to be? It depends. And I think that's a good point to raise, even if you weren't going that way. Because sometimes, yes, I do have a tendency of getting carried away like this. I could pull up some, actually, yeah, screw it, let's do it. Um, a video like the floppy skeleton you mentioned earlier.
Love that one.
Where is that? Yeah, so this one is ridiculous, and this has. If anyone can ever think of a place where you would use this on production, please let me know because I'm still wondering. Um, so this sort of came about by accident because I just wanted to have things sort of trail behind one another, similar to the hair, but without the squash and stretch in it. And this just ballooned to. I think it's this one of these. Where it, oh, where's the one that makes it through the bendy? Maybe I have to already be down the timeline a little bit. Yeah, there it goes. So it's just got one peg here on the hips, but as you move around, everything just sort of drags around that central point. I can't remember why I brought this one up. I've forgotten already. I'm talking too fast. Yeah, it's just a whole bunch of constraints and springs bounced off one another. It's very silly. Hopefully it's entertaining to watch something like this get made. Oh, that's right. I was talking about things that were more problematic than they were worth. So this is sort of something I need to avoid while on the job when it comes to rig building. Because I do a lot of rig building, and it is an ongoing discussion, I think, amongst the rigging community and a dialogue that we have with the animators themselves, is because we love putting in all of these fancy bells and whistles and things that we think are going to save animators time, but by putting like a control on every single strand of hair, it's like, oh yeah, that's more control, that'd be great. But to an animator who has to pose this thing on every frame, that sucks. By adding more and more control points, there's like this apex, right? At a certain point, it starts to become quicker if you had just drawn it. So that's the ongoing battle, is finding that threshold of quality versus efficiency. How do you make it look as good as possible, but it still save as much time as possible? Um, yeah, so on actual jobs, I do sit down and try and decide in advance. Now, is this a road worth going down? Will it actually save time? Have conversations with the animators first to see if it will work. Maybe I'll throw together some prototypes to see if it would actually save time or not. Because, I like putting little interface controls on and things like that. Yeah, you can add a lot of control that doesn't actually help. Some less is more. Less is more is what I'm getting at. And in a case like that T-Pain rig, that was, very much the case. I was removing controls from the head every step of the way until I had one big controller in the middle. The hair automated itself, the mustache automated itself. Yeah, it probably took a little bit longer to build, but when I was able to pump out 3 minutes of animation with it in a few days, then it was absolutely worth it. Meanwhile, industry level rigs, and I get this question a lot from people, is they'll see a really fancy full scale 360 master control turnaround thing, and they're like, I'm making a music video or a 10-minute short or something. Can I have something like that? And personally, I feel like those don't really become worth it until you're doing a few episodes. The more episodes you're doing with those characters, the more worth it becomes. Otherwise, you need
A lot of work up front.
There's a lot of work up front, and it's good to explore in this way because every production has different solutions. I've been at a lot of studios now and a lot of smaller freelance gigs, whether it be working with other people or just going solo, and I have never ever used this program the same way twice. And sometimes I see full-scale studios struggle with that as well, because they'll do one show and be like, this method worked great because they built the method for that show, and then take on a completely different style for the next show and sort of just expect everything to work the same way, and then get a bit of a rude shock when it doesn't. It's like this is probably a little bit of a personal peeve that I have as well, is a lot of time is put into conceptual design of the way characters look and the aesthetic of the show and everything like that. Maybe this happens at other places, but I haven't seen a lot of it, is excessive conceptual movement design, figuring out what is the best way to make this show move. And especially in a world now where cutout methods are more and more prominent, I think that's more and more important now, because there may be solutions that may not be getting considered that would save a ton of time and money while actually improving quality and the day-to-day satisfaction of the animators.
Yeah. So, Colin, I feel like a lot of people who aren't familiar with cutout animation, or at least the techniques involved in making a rig and then animating it, might think that it's sort of an off-the-shelf thing, and you press the animate button, and they might not realize how much craft is involved in building the rigs and then posing them in such a way that you create believable movement.
Yeah, so I think that's something that I like to teach a little bit in my experiment videos, because like, I hope they're not a little bit misleading, because they're not intended to be step-by-step do this style tutorials, but rather the mindset of bending the program around to your individual task or project. Because the way that you would rig if you're working by yourself is probably quite different to if you're working with a team. Because in a team, there is a lot more about, one-size-fits-all solutions, so that animators can expect to see things working the same way across different characters. But when you're by yourself, like, you got to figure out ways that you could make several minutes by yourself relatively quickly. And full-scale industry rigs can take a good week or two to build sometimes. And there is a very common mindset of a lot of fresh or young animators that they need to learn the entire program before they can get started. That's insane. There is a stage, there is a brush tool, there is a timeline. Go nuts. Like, just start with that. Just draw a frame, draw the next frame, and it slowly builds up from there. Like when it came to the node network stuff, my journey with that, how that first started was, hang on, did I have a blank file originally? I did. No, I didn't. Is this a blank one? Yes. No. Hold on. Yeah, here's a blank one. Okay. Was at first I just saw this thing, and I'd seen node systems before, and I knew how powerful they could be. But if you're in the program for the first time, actually, honestly, don't start with the nodes. Get Harmony Essentials. Level up. That's how it's designed to go. Start with a version of the program that does not have an overwhelming number of buttons. So then when you outgrow it, you can upgrade yourself, and then, look at all these quality of life features that I am now craving because I know how to use the other. Anyway. To talk a little bit about the process of learning nodes, it is an expansion on the timeline, isn't it? Because it's layers in a two-dimensional space. So at first, just get used to being able to relayer things by exchanging the chords, or adding in pegs through here. This is I thought you'd added a transition to your screen, but it was just the cat walking past.
Yeah, well, it's a very good transition, though.
It is. So just sort of having this structure, which is no different to what you can do in layers. But then, of course, this is all you need to get to before your imagination starts to take over, and you start to think of things that you can't do otherwise. Like, hang on. This will be relevant, I promise. So what if we had a body that was filled, and this one had it was like hair. Whoa, look at the quality. This is crazy. Look how good of artist. White hair, bang. Okay, so one of the first discoveries I remember making was this, that hierarchy is independent of layer order. So right away you have this where the head and the hair are moving together, but look at that, they're laid in the middle. This changes everything. And
It doesn't have to be a stack.
Right. It's I can't use After Effects anymore because of this. And it's just away from there. Like, going into experimenting with all of these filters is relatively straightforward because they just do what they say on the tin out the gate. But then you start thinking, oh, what if I combine them? What if I add a blur radial with a glow and add this other bit in? And then of course you start getting into composites as well, where you combine multiple strings together and then you only need one of the effect and it does it to all of them. So that was my background, was very, very much in the compositing end, everything that happened underneath the drawing layers. I didn't actually get into rigging until a couple of years later, because I was mainly on traditionally animated shows. But even then, it's just let it grow. Learn new techniques as you need them, rather than this insane idea of learning everything before you start. That's like planning out an entire novel before you start writing it. You just never start writing it. You just yeah. I'll stop.
But that's fantastic. I was going to ask you if you had advice for artists who are new to the Node View and Harmony Premium, but it seems like you've already given your advice, which is don't try to do everything and start experimenting with the nodes one at a time after you've got the basics down.
It's let it be gradual, because then you just have like small little victories constantly. Like, look how many of these things there are. It's like Pokemon. Like adding another one to your collection after, like, when you sort of learn them and how they interact with one another is extremely satisfying. But you can only really learn them by experimenting, I've found. What happens when you plug thing into thing. And yeah, there are particular formulas for rigging and stuff like that have become more and more standard over time. And where was I going with that? But even that can be gradual, and it can change from thing to thing. So there's a number of like high tier rigs that sort of float around the community now that people open up and try out, and that's wonderful. I think those are really, really useful to have. Those templates are really important. But I guess what I'm trying to say is don't be overwhelmed by them. When you see something that intense that can take that long to pose, I know the first time I saw a rig at that level, I was like, I might as well just destroy it. There are so many parts here to pose. But looking back, like I am at that point now, and it happened very gradually and over time. Don't be intimidated, I guess is what I'm saying. There's a lot of buttons here. Strip them away. Just use the simple stuff until you outgrow what you know.
And I also wanted to ask you, while we still have some time, what are your favorite nodes to experiment with? Which sorts of Legos do you like slotting into the other Legos?
Oh, I hope we still have time, because buckle up. Okay. My favorite one, we saw this in the cylinder, is the apply peg transformation. This thing is nuts, because philosophically, all it is really is something, because pegs always go above. The chain goes ding, 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 all the way up, and things start getting parented, and you get this little hierarchy, blah, 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 blah. But the Playback transformation is this wacky override where it lets you put a peg on the bottom, which is so freaking weird. And there's so many bizarre things that you can do with breaking a rule like that. Like, for one thing, it's like, okay, this is now all parented at the bottom. So if this didn't all go to one point and it just splayed off into all sorts of random directions, and they needed to stay independent, there's still a way to have a master at the bottom. That's particularly cool. And the other, of course, strange thing is that you can have now 2 instances of the same structure. Whoa, this one's over here now. And the same philosophy we saw for the cylinder was, what if they get combined together? What if we move both of them at this... Wait, hang on, where'd the other one go? Yeah, there. What if we move both of them at the same time? Oh no, now we get this like amplifying effect, so you can like distribute things evenly. There's so many weird uses for this, so it's a very, very fun one to experiment with, and how it sort of plugs into other nodes. The whole peg game, I think, is one of the foundations of what makes Harmony really cool. The fact that because like I almost encourage people away from this at first, right? The fact that every peg and every drawing layer has all of these parameters inside that can be keyframed separately. I think it's much healthier, at least at first, to treat each peg as one parameter each. Like if you're doing the get out here. Oh man, trying to do this all quickly while talking is tricky, but let's do it anyway. Do we have a hard limit on time, or can I do this?
We don't have a hard limit. We just don't want to take up too much of your time.
Well, that's okay, because I'll probably be going back to bed. But you've psyched me up now, so I'm going to struggle with that. So, okay, wait. So, the fun, simple example, always with the bouncy ball. All animators love the bouncy ball, where we do
Very Preston Blair.
And the frame, and the one in the middle, and then you get another peg. That one just goes from left to right. Then once everything gets keyframed together, I mean, okay, so this one's not gonna loop terribly. I mean, it's not gonna do the slow bounce down to nothing, but it demonstrates the point that, like, each peg does its own thing, but by combining them, oh wow, now we have this like, cool combo animation. And this philosophy is life. What happens when independent things work together? That's the best. And then, of course, once you start getting more confident with things, then you can start moving in and just doing that inside one peg with the different parameters. And combining those with rotations and transparencies and things, and realizing that, oh, hang on, all of this is literally just a number, and numbers don't mean anything until you connect it to a parameter. And it's the rabbit hole just keeps going and going. And maybe that is frightening to artists who hate numbers, but there is I think it's cool. Yeah.
We got a request in the chat. Friend of the show, Z Fishface, is asking, can we see the Power Ranger super quick, the rig? She's clarifying.
This is they're just messing with me. We were talking about Power Rangers in a private chat the other day and started talking amongst themselves. Let's bring it up while he's live so that he goes on a Power Rangers rant. I don't actually have a rig of any of them.
Okay, all right.
I think. Actually, hang on. No, hang on. I'm wrong. There was one that I did yesterday just as a gag. Golly, where was it? This is absolutely not worth doing while we have limited time, but whatever.
Well, while we're doing that,
I drew myself as Alpha.
Ooh.
And then I draw the bird brain as Lord Zed because, I mean, you'd have to, right? Who else would she be?
Science.
But if that counts as a rig, then hooray, because that's literally one curve deformer going up the middle, and that's it.
I think
All
that
right,
counts.
well,
So, Colin, we're running out of time. Where can our viewers find more of your work?
well, YouTube/Onion Skin is the place the place to be. Look at this. Whoa. Hang on. Bang. All right. Look at all this stuff. This thing's been around for like 5 years. There's all sorts of different things. Here's the cylinder that we just talked about. That was cool. There's a lot more experiments sort of up the top. Um, these ones are neat. No one's watched these ones, but they're all about like sublayers and like very small, like 1 minute tutorials at a time that are useful for whatever you're doing. Yeah, I'll stop scrolling through these now. No, I won't. Look at them all. Go watch them. Every single one. Yeah, Iron Skin channel is where all of that is. I have a Twitter as well, which is if you want to talk to me directly, I suppose. Links for that are on the YouTube. Yeah.
And we'll make sure we put links in the sidebar as well on Twitch.
Cool.
So I
Thank you.
want to thank all of our viewers for watching today's interview. And if you're interested in cutout animation or rigging in Harmony Premium, I recommend downloading the 21-day free trial and visiting learn.toonboom.com, as well as Colin's YouTube channel, The Onion Skin. For those of you interested in instructor-led training, I'd suggest acting soon because registration closes soon for our instructor-led training sessions, which start in early May at toonboom.com/training. And next Tuesday, Collaboratory is back. Collaboratory is the show where our returning guest artist, Mike Morris, will improvise an animatic with suggestions from our audience. And we're really looking forward to the next show, so we hope that you'll tune in.
Sounds wonderful.
All right, and until next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.